So I am the Operations and Finance Director of Mountain City Public Montessori. So that means that I handle all of the operational pieces of the school, from the budget to the bus to making sure that kids have lunches, that all the bills get paid, all those kind of ins and outs of the school. I was also a founding board member when we applied as part of the charter process with the state of North Carolina. So I've been on board here with Mountain City from the very beginning. About 2 years ago, I was touring spaces, looking for a space to put our school. So I have a lot of kind of that background knowledge. Also joining us on the call, if you have any specific educational questions, is Rachel Shaw Marshall, who is our curriculum director. And so she is our Montessori trained person. She's trained at multiple levels of Montessori education. And she handles testing and education and making sure that teachers have the professional development that they need and all of that aspect of our school. So the two of us together make up the leadership team of Mountain City. And then we've got various other staff members who help support that work. So I will just get into it. I'm going to switch over to my presentation tab, which means that I will not be able to see you guys anymore. So definitely shout at me if anything seems like it's not working or you can't see anything. Okay, Mountain City Public Montessori. So we are currently the only public Montessori school in Western North Carolina. We are located in downtown Asheville on the campus of Central United Methodist Church. For those of you that haven't been down Church Street, it is a very quiet one-way street that when you're on it, you would not realize how close you are to the rest of downtown. It is a really quiet street that just has churches on it, churches and schools. There's a child care center in the church across the street. But we are just super close to everything that downtown. So our students are able to walk to the public library, the art museum, the science museum. We go on walking field trips quite frequently and are really just beginning to explore all of the possibilities that our downtown campus can offer to us. As a public charter school, we do get state funding as our primary funding source. And we offer a lot of the same services that a conventional public school would offer. So we have a free lunch program, free and reduced lunch program to folks who qualify. So if you would qualify at the federal level for a free or reduced lunch, then we're able to pass that on to our students. We do have bus transportation available. Right now, we are just providing bus service to kids who live within the city because it's just one school bus. And we do draw kids from all over the county and from surrounding counties as well. So that would be a very long bus ride if we were, sending it out to the far corners of Western North Carolina. But that is something we offer for kiddos who live close in. We have a variety of after-school options. So right now we've been partnering with a couple different community organizations. Some of them pick our students up on our campus after school, and some of them, our students take the bus, the school bus, to those sites after school. But it's currently all off-site. We're looking at what some on-site aftercare might look like next year. But this year being our first year in operation, we wanted to kind of reduce that management piece for ourselves. We currently have about 100 students enrolled, and next year we'll be growing to 140 for that 24-25 school year. Currently, we are K-6. Next year, we're adding 7th grade, and then the year after that, we will add 8th grade, and that is where we plan to top out. So we will be a K-8 school by the 25-26 school year. We also partner with Little Grove Preschool to offer preschool programming for 3- and 4-year-olds. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on a future slide. So the mission of our school is to provide that equitable access to a high quality, relevant Montessori education to meet the needs of all students and strengthen our community, really with that emphasis on that equitable access. We are not a private school, we are a charter school. So admission to our school is based on a lottery system. which means that if there are more applications than we have space for in any given grade level, it goes to a lottery that's run and managed by a computer. So every child has that equal opportunity to be able to attend our school. So it's not, like we're hand selecting which students we want. It's really a completely blind process. So the vision of Mountain City Public Montessori is that we really believe that all students deserve access to a quality education that affirms each individual and enhances the collective by giving them an opportunity to practice living in and contributing to a more just society. We'll talk a little bit about Montessori education in a few slides, but a big piece of that is that practical life experience that students gain in that Montessori classroom. There's a lot of independence, even all the way down in that kindergarten level. So a little bit about Montessori. Montessori education really allows for student autonomy from a very early age. That's something that makes it very different from conventional educational methods. There's a lot of student autonomy and responsibility starting all the way back in preschool, in that 3-year-old classroom. Executive function skills are really embedded in that day-to-day learning as students work with their teachers to plan their learning activities during a 3-hour work cycle. So that 3-hour work cycle is the first 3 hours when students arrive at school. So our day starts at 8 o'clock. Students come in, they go straight to work, and that 3-hour work cycle begins. And during that 3-hour work cycle, they're working on whatever's on their work plan. They've made a plan with their teacher. They are familiar with the works in the classroom, and they're able to go and self-select works and work on if they want to do math first and get really deep into a math activity for, an hour and a half, then that's something that they can do. If they want to come in and kind of ease into it by doing, some independent reading, that's something that they can do as well. It really allows them to, plan their own learning. We have multi-age classrooms that allows students to move from novice to mentor in that collaborative environment where peer teaching is really valued. So in a classroom, in a Montessori classroom, you're going to have 3, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, that pre-K3, pre-K4, and kindergartners all in that same classroom. And those 3-year-olds are your novices. They're coming in and they're brand new. And those older kiddos, those kindergartners, are able to really help mentor those younger students and help teach them the classroom norms and values. But then also, that's really truly how, as a human, you've learned something, right? It's when you can teach it to somebody else. And so a lot of that happens in that classroom. That multi-age classroom also really allows kids to move ahead in areas where they're really strong and where they really excel without it being, without the whole class working on the same thing at the same time. So kids can really move at their own pace. Kids who struggle academically in that environment still have those opportunities to lead those younger students. And that really helps them to maintain their identity as a really important person in that learning environment, and not just that kid who struggles with everything. Montessori has a lot of hands-on materials. And so this can allow even really young children in our primary classroom, our 3 or 4 or 5-year-olds, to practice with complex math and language skills. And it helps them move from the concrete to the abstract using what's known as a spiraling curriculum. So moving all the way from that very concrete, I have a single bead is 1, moving all the way to the abstract of 1 being a number on a piece of paper. In a Montessori classroom, students will spend 3 years in that same classroom. And this really helps them develop strong, supportive relationships with both their teachers and their peers, and really helps lend itself to developing really robust classroom culture. Students in the Montessori classroom all work together to help care for the classroom environment. This can mean that students will sharpen pencils, they might organize books, they might care for plants or class pets. Each child in the classroom has a job that really helps them be a valuable member of that school community. Those jobs are important. The classroom truly belongs to the students, and they are responsible for it. And this also helps that classroom be a safe space for them to be able to learn and grow because they have ownership of that space. In the Montessori classroom, concentration is really highly valued as part of the learning process rather than the product of the learning process. So, you're not going to see teachers kind of interrupting kids who are really concentrating on their work and saying, oh, well, our 20 minutes of math is up. It's time for us to move on to the next thing. That concentration on that work is really highly valued and respected. That's why when we're doing our in-person tours, you'll see that the space for those tours is really limited because we don't want to sort of constantly be interrupting kids in their learning environments throughout the day. The Montessori curriculum goes from the whole to the parts so that learning, as students are learning, it's always really embedded in a kind of a broad context or a big picture. So through all of that kind of Montessori background, our teachers utilize the strengths of the Montessori method to help serve all students, including students who are often marginalized, so that all students can see themselves as learners and realize the potential that they have to contribute to the classroom. Where did my notes go? There they are. Okay. So at Mountain City Public Montessori, we will have all of the core academic subjects taught using the Montessori method and Montessori materials. We have teachers who are trained either in the Montessori method or in who have their North Carolina teaching license or both. Our teachers who came in this year without that Montessori credential are all working on their Montessori credential currently, so that all of our teachers will have that credential and be trained. Cosmic education is a Montessori term that's a really important piece of that Montessori method. It's that system of starting from the whole and working towards the parts, and sometimes it gets referred to as a spiraling curriculum. And this introduces students to academic subjects in an integrated way, giving them that foundation of that big perspective and then helping them see connections between all of the different pieces. The science of reading is a piece that's kind of one of the buzzwords in public school right now because we're recognizing that the science of reading is really important in helping kids learn to read. And the science of reading and Montessori are very well aligned with one another. The science of reading really supports and reaffirms all of our Montessori literacy strategies and helps kids become fluent readers. So the science of reading is a body of research that incorporates insights and research from disciplines that include developmental psychology, educational psychology, cognitive science, and cognitive neuroscience. And we can see the science of reading demonstrated in all of our language materials. And so in this picture, this girl is working with our reading program, which is the Washika reading program. Sometimes the kids call it the rainbow drawers or the rainbow cabinet because of the pretty colors. And when you go into a Montessori classroom, sometimes that's one of the first things that you see because those colors just really pop off the shelves. Students in our classrooms will, as I mentioned before, be working on practical life skills. Those practical life skills not just teach students, things like care of the environment and care for plants, but it also helps students build their fine motor and their gross motor skills. It helps them with coordination and concentration. It helps them with that sense of order and independence and helps build those executive functioning skills that are so important. You'll see in our classroom too that there's a strong emphasis on the sensorial curriculum. The sensorial curriculum helps students to experience, sequence, and categorize information using all of their senses. And this helps to build early foundations for mathematics and language. And so you might go into a primary classroom and students will be working with something called the sound cylinders. And so they've got these little cylinders and they're shaking them and they're matching the sounds between the two cylinders. They've got different materials inside. We'll see a strong emphasis in our school on interpersonal skills, which includes conflict resolution and restorative practices. We really encourage students to advocate for themselves and to model grace and courtesy, which helps to develop more socially conscious and compassionate students. And then we've talked a little bit already about executive function skills. The independence that students have in that Montessori classroom really helps them to develop the executive function skills of working memory, planning, organization, time management, adaptable thinking, and self-monitoring or self-regulation. We're really interested in how our students learn these executive function skills, and that is one of the standardized assessments that we use with our students, is to be able to measure that progression of executive function skills. And so in our school, we have primary classrooms. We have 2 primary classrooms with those pre-K students and those kindergartners. We have 3 lower elementary classrooms, which have first, second, and third graders. And then currently we have 1 upper elementary classroom, and next year we will have 2 upper elementary classrooms with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And then our adolescent program next year will have our 7th graders. So at our school, our 6th graders are in with our upper elementary. I know at other schools, 6th grade gets pulled out for middle school. So in our classrooms, those 6th graders are the leaders in our upper elementary classroom. And then they move into that adolescent program as 7th graders. So what happens in a Montessori classroom? Here's some pictures from our classrooms. You'll see class meetings at the beginning or at the end of every day, or both. All during the work cycle, you might see small group instruction, where there's a teacher working or giving a lesson to a small group of children, or a small group of students. You might see individual instruction, where a teacher is giving a lesson to one student. You might see children working together on a lesson, or a student giving a lesson to another student, either a same age peer, or a younger peer, or even an older peer. You might just see students working together on a work that they both enjoy, or that they're both wanting to work on together. You're going to see a lot of deep focus and concentration. When you go into these classrooms during that work cycle, there's this like happy hum of engagement. All the kids are working. They're all working on different things. Some of them are sitting on the floor. Some of them are sitting at tables. But everybody's working and everybody's engaged in that kind of happy work cycle. So you'll really see that classroom full of engaged learners, and they may all be working on different things. So some are working on math, some are reading, some are writing, some are doing big projects, some are working on geography. All kinds of different things could be happening all at the same time. So Mountain City as a public charter school, we are technically considered a public school, which means that we follow state laws and requirements around public school and public education. It means that we provide EC services, exceptional children's services. If your child has an IEP, we will provide related services, OT, speech, PT. We use beginning of grade, end of grade, and other benchmark testing. And our teachers have either that NC license and or a Montessori credential. And as I mentioned, all of our teachers will have that Montessori credential as our goal. We have 2 teachers right now who are currently working on that credential, but who already had their NC license. So our adolescent program launches next year. And so we're currently accepting enrollment of rising 7th grade students. We are going to have an info session specifically about our adolescent program because it is so different from our primary, lower, and upper elementary grades. And that will be on January 23rd at 5:30 with Rachel, our curriculum director. Rachel has worked in adolescent programs and is very familiar with adolescent programs and can answer all of your questions. So if you have a rising 7th grader and you're interested in that program, that will be a great session for you to attend. Or if you know anyone with an adolescent who just needs to be in a Montessori adolescent program, then send them our way. Same on the other end for the preschool. Our 3 and 4-year-old students are enrolled through Little Grove Preschool, which is our preschool partner. So we do not enroll those 3 and 4-year-olds, but they do learn alongside our kindergarten students in our primary classroom to give us that true Montessori learning environment. So if you're interested in Little Grove for your 3 or 4-year-old, please go to littlegrovepreschool.org for more information about that preschool program at our school. If you want to see our school in person, we will have an open house. It is a Saturday, February 24th from 10 to noon. This is a drop-in kind of open house, so you can come and ask questions. You can see that prepared environment in our classrooms. And we have an RSVP on our website just so we know about how many people to expect. I believe that right now our Tuesday tours during the school day are maxed out, but from what I understand, I see from time to time someone will void their tour. So if you're looking for a Tuesday tour, just keep an eye on that as well, because sometimes things open up. So does anyone have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see all of your faces again. And you can either put questions in the chat or raise your hand.
Brittany, there's a question in the chat box that says, what happens after the work cycle?
So after the work cycle, so that work cycle runs for those first 3 hours, and then our students transition to a variety of other things. So they might go to recess, they might go to lunch, or they might go to a activity class like drama or music or PE or art. And so there's kind of a schedule that revolves all of the classes through those different activities. And then they come back to the classroom for kind of a little mini work cycle at the end of the day. That one tends to have more of a focus on literacy. So there's a lot of independent reading or writing activities that happen during that time, but it's another kind of return to work in that kind of little second part of the day. Seeing a lot of questions in here now.
Do you have any outdoor space?
Yes, we do. We are downtown, but we have an outdoor playground. We also are able to utilize a playground that's across the street at another church that does not have a weekday school. So our students walk across the street and use that playground. It's slightly larger than our playground, so it can handle 2 classrooms at once. And then our playground has 1 classroom at a time that's out there.
Are you in your permanent space?
Maybe so, maybe not. We would like to be able to grow a little larger than what our space allows us to grow to currently. But we do really like being downtown. So we are just kind of always keeping our eyes and our ears open for where we might land next. But we are really committed to staying close to town so that we're accessible to folks from all over the county.
What do you think the transition, let's try again. What do you think the transition would be like for a 4th grader coming from a traditional Christian?
That might be a good question for you, Rachel. If you want to answer that one.
I can. The transition can be challenging in the way of that independent work, that autonomy piece. If you are a student from a traditional school where you've been told what to do and when to do it, it can be a little challenging to understand the role of choice, but our guides, our teachers are well versed in how to connect with those students and how to structure choice so that it starts out with maybe an option of 2 and then builds to the option of the whole shelf or the whole of the lessons that they've been given. So the other piece of that is students who come to Montessori from traditional school love the openness of the work cycle, and that when they get interested in something they're working on, they don't have to stop every 45 minutes to change classes or to change topics, that they really get to spend a long amount of time on something that they're interested in doing, and they love being able to do that. And also working with a variety of students, not just your own age group, but being able to work with those older students or those younger students. They like that as well. The next question says, how does the timing or scheduling of the pre-K class work if the preschool is half day and the K students stay all day?
That's a great question. So our preschool program is an unlicensed program, which means that those students leave at the 4-hour mark. So they leave at 12 o'clock. So they stay through that morning work cycle, and then recess and lunch, or lunch and then recess. And then they dismiss from the playground. So they get picked up at 12. And then our kindergarten students do that same kind of afternoon activity rotation, potentially drama, art, music. They sometimes will get an extra block of outdoor time, and then extra work time in the classroom but it's just the kindergartners. And so that's really a nice piece for those kids who are really still learning to read, right? And that it becomes a little bit of a smaller group of kids that's focused just on those 5 and 6-year-olds. Coordinate enrollment for siblings. Oh, do you want to read the questions, Rachel?
Yeah. Do you coordinate enrollment for siblings? If so, does this extend to siblings applying to Little Grove?
Yes, we do that to the best of our ability. We work really closely with Little Grove during that enrollment process. If their enrollment exceeds the space that they have, then they also do a lottery. And they do theirs right after we do ours. And so one of those questions that the preschool director has for us after we pull our lottery is when she does enrollment, do you have a sibling that's applying to Mountain City? And then I can tell her, oh, this student got in, and she can give them priority in her lottery. Where things start to get a little wonky is that we might pull our lottery and that first wave of kids gets in, and then we have some folks turn that spot down, right? And we actually are still filling spots. We pull our lottery in April, but we still fill spots in May, June, July, as the charter world kind of shakes itself out, right? Because there's people who might say, oh, Mountain City is our second choice, but Fernleaf is our first choice. But then they get into Mountain City and not Fernleaf. Oh, but then in June they get a spot at Fernleaf, so they drop Mountain City. So there's a lot of shaking out that happens through that summer. And really it seems like everyone's where they kind of want to be by the first day of school. But it does make it hard for us to give that priority enrollment to those preschool siblings if someone gets offered a late spot. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you want to say your question again? Whoever asked that one, did that answer your question?
That was me. Kind of related. Thank you. That did answer. But I'm wondering also if you had somebody in Little Grove already, if the older sibling would get priority in the lotto for the kindergarten.
No. No. I'm thinking through that. That is not a priority enrollment piece for us. So if you had a 3-year-old who was like in Little Grove, it does not give you priority for your, say, 4th grader.
Okay. How about kids that are in Little Grove? As a 4-year-old, do they get in priority for the kindergarten?
Currently, yes. So that is a new law that was just passed in North Carolina that does allow us to give some priority admission to students enrolled in a partner preschool.
Okay.
And that is something that we will be trialing this year, but we're going to kind of see how it goes before we really commit to that long term.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. How big are your classes and how many guides do you have per student?
So we have right now our class size is between 19 and 21. So we do max out at 21 per class. And so that would be 7 at each grade level. So for example, in lower elementary, 7 first graders, 7 second graders, and 7 third graders. And then there are 2 guides in the classroom. So there's the lead guide and then an assistant guide.
How often do kiddos do activity classes?
So we have activities scheduled right now for 4 days a week. We do currently this year, our calendar has an early release on Fridays. So on Fridays, we release at 1 o'clock, and that's our professional development time for our teachers. And so the other 4 days, the 4 days that go until 3, we have activities each one of those days. So we have right now, this year we have PE, or we call it healthful living, because we don't have a big gymnasium for them to do like dodgeball or traditional PE activities in. But she does a great job in our space. So healthful living, drama, visual art, and music are our current activities.
Can you please share how you create a supportive learning environment for students with physical and developmental disabilities?
Yeah, Rachel, this might be a good one for you too. Yeah, if you want to go into this.
Yeah,
one.
I was just thinking this is a good both of us kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have the ability, because of our 3-hour work cycle, for students to receive services both inside their classroom with the other students and outside in a separate space, depending on the need and depending on the student and the timing of day and all those different things. So we have the ability for our EC specialists to come in to the classroom with a push-in activity, but also to pull out students, maybe with other students with similar goals, to work with them in small groups or individually. We have an inclusive environment. Naturally, within the Montessori environment, there are layers of accommodations that are just part of the philosophy and part of the teaching style and approach, such as having enough time to complete a work assignment without feeling rushed, or there's a place in every classroom that you can go for a quiet space to work. I'm trying to think of the other things that are accommodations, Brittany.
Probably just that multi-age learning environment means that a student perhaps with a developmental disability who isn't necessarily working at the same level as their same age peers, they're not going to be singled out for not working on the same level as their same age peers, because of the way students are all just working at whatever level they are at. It's not going to be as much of a, oh, you're not doing division yet, so you have to go into this like remedial math group. Right. It's just, oh, this is the math work that you're working on right now. Right. So yeah, that
yeah, and they support each other. The students support each other, and there is less of that knowing who's quote unquote behind and who's not, because we're all working. And then in specific, we have one EC teacher this year, and she is very versed in understanding all the different needs that she will be interacting with. And we have a wide range of students with IEPs and 504s. I hope that answered your question. If it did not, please pipe up and let us know how else we can support that. Do the kindergartners participate in drama and other activities you mentioned?
Yeah, so yes and no. It has largely, this year, our kindergartners have kind of struggled a little bit that time of day with that much transition in their afternoons. And so we've really been following the lead, truly in Montessori, the lead of the child and what the kiddos are telling us. And so we did pull back a little bit from some of those afternoon activities just to let the classrooms get a little bit more settled here at the start of the year. And we're now in the process of reintroducing them. So, some of that, it just looks a little different at the kindergarten level. We're experimenting with, does a shorter period of time with smaller groups work better for that age? Getting PE or healthful living outside versus doing it in a room, does that feel better for that age group? So it definitely, the way we're presenting it is a little bit different, but we are giving them those opportunities for those activities.
How much demand do you anticipate for incoming kindergartner spots?
It's a great question. Wouldn't we all like to know? It will definitely, it will be at a lottery. What I think is hard for kindergarten in particular is that there is a little bit of a culture in Asheville of, just apply for all the charters. And so it's hard for us to know of those folks that are applying for kindergarten spots, how many of them truly want their children to attend our school and how many of them might turn those spots down. I think folks want to have options, which is wonderful. But, are a lot of those spots that get offered in that first wave going to turn over? Potentially, yes. So it's hard for me even to look at, the number of applications or folks that are signing up for the lottery and be able to say like, this is going to be really like cutthroat high demand. Or again, if it's all just going to shake out kind of how it needs to shake out and everyone ends up where they want to be by the time the first day of school rolls around.
That was my question.
Oh, yeah, Sam. Sorry.
I was wondering, sorry, my son's in the background. How many of that first round of folks turned over last year?
Yeah, so it was probably like 75%. Yeah. Like there's the ones who are like, oh yeah, I'm in. and then there's the folks who are like, maybe, or then they want to learn more. And we do have an open house that we schedule for after the lottery gets drawn. So people who are like, this was a surprise, I didn't expect to get in, now I need to learn about this school, have the opportunity to come and see it in April.
Eleanor has her hand raised.
Yeah, Eleanor.
Hey, I was just wondering, when did you end up with your final roster? So if there's a 75% turnover and then you kind of figure it out in the summer, is there an expected timeline where everything gets wrapped up for all the schools?
I would say that things felt pretty stable by the end of July, but I was still enrolling children our first 2-3 days of school.
Well, thank you for all you do. That sounds like a really hard job.
I have learned to not do too much too early because you never know what's going to happen, right?
I'm sure.
Save
And then
it
my second quick question is for kindergartners, do they have any kind of rest time or nap time?
They do have a quiet time that's after they come in from the playground that, in some of the classes I've heard it referred to as peacetime. And so the lights are down and they're engaged in independent work only. And the classrooms are kind of quieter before they gear up for their afternoon activities.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
How do you enroll in a minutes lottery?
So on our website, if you go to the enrollment tab, there is a link to lotteries and you can enroll through lotteries. It's pretty simple. They do not ask for very much information. At the point at which you're pulled in the lottery, then we collect all of the extra pieces, right? Like the birth certificate, the proof of residency, all the data about your child. But just to enroll in the lottery, it's really as simple as like name and birthday. So it's pretty easy.
Thank you. How has the transition been for kindergartners coming from Montessori preschool?
I think it's been pretty smooth. We've had children from a variety of different Montessori preschools in our primary program this year. And, definitely being familiar with the works and the routines is helpful. But, anytime you have a brand new batch of kids all together, there's so much learning, that that takes place around, here's what happens in this space and, in this school and, in our routine here. But it definitely takes some of that kind of learning curve out for children, for sure.
I would agree. If you, in, Montessori schools, you'll most likely all have the same materials. So that can be comforting to students coming from a different school. What does your EC department look like?
Yeah, so currently this year we have a full-time EC specialist, and then we contract with Carolina Peds for all of our related services. And so they send therapists over with just whatever amount of time is written into a child's IEP. And they're able to provide those services in our school. And then if we need additional evaluation or psychological testing or anything like that, then Carolina Peds handles that. We are looking at adding a second EC person next year. And so whether or not that would be a half-time person or like a 3/4 person will largely depend on what that caseload grows to with additional enrollment for next year. And that department will just continue to grow as we grow. So
we also have a school counselor that is part of our team.
Yes.
As well. If a parent works downtown, is it possible for a student to be dropped off by the bus?
By the city bus, or I might need some clarification here. Dropped off at their work?
It says if a parent works downtown, is it possible for a student to be dropped off by the bus? This is a question from Misty. So if they're still on, maybe we can get some clarification.
We can. Our school bus can go to your work. That's no problem. We're doing that this year. And if you want to clarify.
It was if she could be dropped off at my work by the bus that's owned by the school.
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Okay.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What are your school hours?
So we are this year currently 8 to 3 with that 1 o'clock release on Friday. We are currently working on our calendar for next year, and we will probably be keeping that same schedule. 99% sure.
How many spots will be available for kindergarten?
There are 21.
Do you have any idea how many spots are available for 4th grade?
4th grade. Not off the top of my head. And some of it will depend on if we have students leave at the end of this year, which we will do a re-enrollment just survey to parents before we draw our lottery, so that if someone's like, oh yeah, we're definitely like moving to Charlotte or, going to Franklin or what have you, then we can get that information. Right now, I think that there are maybe 3 or 4 spots in 4th grade. But don't quote me on that.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Forgive this question since lottery is new to me. Mm-hmm. If you do get a spot in 2024-25, when the 2025-26 school year rolls around, do you have to re-enter the lottery? Is there a priority for already attending?
You do not have to do anything to stay enrolled. Once you're in, you're in. So you can come in kindergarten and stay all the way through 8th grade and never have to do anything to re-enroll. So,
how much outdoor time do students receive?
So it varies depending on the weather and the day. Our teachers definitely love to be outside. A lot of times when the weather is nice, they'll eat lunch outside and then, take a slightly longer recess. When it's real cold, they're out there for 30 minutes and then they're coming back in again. But we have a 45-minute recess on days that our students go to the playground across the street. It's a 35-minute recess on the days that they're and the one that's attached to our building. And especially at the kindergarten level, we are working on building out an outdoor classroom. There's a chunk of time where they're able to go back outside towards the end of the day, which they take advantage of when the weather is really nice. So our kindergarten students could be anywhere between like 40 minutes, 45 minutes to, an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the weather. And then when we look at our upper grades, walking field trips, it's not unstructured outdoor time, but, upper elementary, it looks like it's going to be really nice on Friday. So we're going to take a walking field trip to the park in Montford, and spend, have a picnic lunch there and, have a longer chunk of outdoor time. So minimum of 30 minutes, but typically more than that.
Do the students with IEPs and 504s have their own classroom?
We have a EC room for pullout, but we do not have a self-contained intensive intervention classroom where students spend the full day.
Can you put siblings in the same class?
We did that. We let that be family choice this year. We had a couple, families who were like, oh, I've got these twins in kindergarten and they've never been apart, and can we please put them in the same class? We've also had families who are like, absolutely do not put my children in the same class. So, a lot of times we will just have conversations with the families around what the parent feels is best for them and their learning.
Is the school fully wheelchair accessible?
It is. I'm pausing. We have an elevator. It's a 3-story building, and there is an elevator that goes between the floors. We have handicapped accessible restrooms on every floor. The only piece that I think is slightly complicated is that there is a step down to get out to the playground, but that can be avoided by going outside and then going in through the playground gate, like out the front. So probably, 75 to 85% wheelchair accessible.
What time does class start end? Is there before care?
So we do not currently have before care. School starts at 8 o'clock. Our car line opens at 7:45. We have a handful of children whose parents work for other schools or who need to be at work very early. And we try and prioritize those students for our bus, so that the bus is picking them up around the time the parents need to be headed out the door. We have some community stops. And so we have one family who lives in Weaverville, and then they teach out in Inca, and they drop their children off at a community bus stop that is in West Asheville. So it's still kind of in that loop of where our bus goes, but it's on the way to work for mom and dad. So we try and accommodate to the best of our ability.
All right. Can you talk about the weighted lottery?
Yes. So hopefully I can get this right because I don't have the weights in front of me. So we do have a weighted lottery for economically disadvantaged, which is any child who would qualify for federal free or reduced lunch can opt to check the economically disadvantaged box. We also, since we are in downtown Asheville, and in the Asheville City Schools District, which is under a federal desegregation order, we are able to give weight to folks who are racial minorities, should they choose to check that box. And so what that means is that there are some percentages. I believe this is where I don't want to quote the percentages and get them wrong. But there are some percentages. And so the computer, when it pulls the lottery, will try and match those percentages with the folks who have self-identified in those categories. Does that make sense? Is that clear as mud? This is why we let a computer do it for us.
Do you have any idea how many second grade spots are available?
I do not. I'm thinking it's probably one or two.
Are there more formal field trips or enrichment activities that take place off campus?
Yes. One of the ones that happens regularly is that our students take weekly walking field trips to the library. And students have the option of having their own library card, and then they can check out books or bring them home, but classrooms have their own library card as well, so that teachers can check out books. So if they're doing a study on volcanoes, the library will pull a bunch of volcano books and the teachers can check those out. As a first year school this year, we are still really exploring what some of those opportunities are. And you know, we've been in conversation with the art museum about getting our students over to the art museum. We have a after school group on Fridays that currently goes over to the Asheville Museum of Science after school on Fridays. And, you know, we're looking at plays over at Diana Wortham and Asheville Community Theater, different musical performances. It's really fantastic that we don't necessarily have to be reliant on our school bus to be able to get some of those, you know, field trips in.
Is there a nurse on staff? And if so, are they full-time?
We have a nurse that we are consulting with, and they are not currently full-time. That is a priority as we grow to add that position. I don't think it will be next year, but it may be the year after. One of the pieces there is that in the building where we are, we don't have great space for a nurse. And so, you know, she would be like posted up in the hallway all the time. We don't really have a place to put her currently. But, you know, when the question at the beginning of, are we in our forever space? Like, that's where we start to dream of like, oh, if we had a larger space, we would have, you know, the nurse, and we would have the, you know, the dedicated music room and all of those kinds of pieces. So.
Can you speak to school security and safety measures?
Yeah. So when we had the Office of Charter Schools visit us, she said, well, my goodness, this place is like, I don't need to be worried about security here. We are very fortunate in that Central United Methodist Church, who we are on the campus of, takes security very seriously and already took security very seriously before we arrived as a school. And so we really just tightened up a lot of those procedures as well. So the entire building is always locked with video monitored doors. The school itself is in its own wing that's attached to the church building. And we have our own door that is video monitored and locked all the time. If you go into that door, it takes you kind of into a vestibule where that's a stairwell that takes you up to our 3 floors. And then those doors are all locked with keyed entry. So if someone were to come into the vestibule, they are still locked out of where the spaces where students are. So there's multiple kind of points where you have to put in a key code to be able to get through the fire doors, through the security doors. And then there are cameras everywhere. And the church has its own security, and they've got a security kind of bay where they have, you know, cameras all over the building. And they like to laugh at me because sometimes Amazon will deliver our packages random places in the building, and I'm scurrying around looking for the packages, and they're laughing at me because they can see me on the cameras just going all over the building. So it does feel, even though it's downtown, it feels like a very secure space.
And from our desk, we can see the front door camera as well.
Yes.
What is the approximate admittance ratio of the lottery? And thank you for all the info.
Yeah, so it depends on how many applications we get. So last year we had about 400 applications for just over 100 spots. So, you know, 1 in 4. This year we have fewer spots because we're not filling an entire school. But we may also have fewer applicants because we're not filling an entire school. And so, yeah. I wish I could give you a better answer, but I'm not sure what it's going to look like.
Can you talk about the aftercare option on Friday?
Yeah, so this year we are running a program that we have a variety of choices. And so our first run lasted for 11 weeks and there were 4 different options. There was like an art class, a drama class, like a STEM kind of science class, and a cooking class. And so for a small fee, you can, opt to have your kids stay on our campus and attend one of those aftercare classes. The first one went from the start of school through to winter break. Our second round just started right after winter break and will run up to spring break. And the second round, we've got an art class. We've got a group that goes over to Amos, and then we've got a group that's doing like a yoga and art kind of inspired activity. Next year, we are applying to have AmeriCorps folks on our team that would work with us for part of our aftercare program. And so it might look different next year than it looks this year. However, we are committed to providing, some kind of aftercare option for that 1 to 3 o'clock range on that day that we dismiss early. We also, some of our community partners that come and pick up at our school for aftercare throughout the week, we're open to doing extended aftercare on Fridays. And so, Asheville Community Movement picks up on our campus at 1 o'clock on Fridays. So they pick up at 3 o'clock Monday through Thursday. They pick up at 1 o'clock on Fridays. So if you have your kid in that program, you don't need to do anything extra. They just come and pick up early. Some of the other partners were interested in doing that, but they just didn't have enough kids register for the program to make it really work. So that's a possibility as well.
What are the possible ways of skipping the lottery, like siblings, board members, that kind of stuff?
So there is an enrollment preference for already enrolled siblings. So they will get a preference. And then there is an enrollment preference for staff and board, but it does cap out at, I believe, 10% of total school enrollment. So if our total school enrollment, if we have 140, then that caps out at 14 children. Right now, we are not really approaching that cap at all. But I could see, if we, depending on what our growth looks like, if our board grows, all of that, if we have one new board member who's got 6 children or something, that could change. Do we have a board spot open? There is some information, I believe, on our website about joining our board. There's a process. Yeah,
it is a process. That is all of that. That is all the questions that I see in the chat. Did I miss anyone? And you're welcome to ask something that we haven't read.
Well, if you think of anything, feel free to drop us an email, info at mcpublic.org. Will reach us very quickly. You are also welcome to call us. Our phone number is on the website, 828-570-5554. Or drop by an open house. Our open house, I had the date on there on the slideshow and I don't remember it. I believe it's in February. So come join us at an open house and see our school and ask us any questions that you may have. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see some of y'all next year at our school. Have a great evening.